Welcome, everybody. My name is Esther Duflo, and I'm going to be teaching this class along with Abhijit Banerjee. This class is the Challenge of World Poverty 14.73x. Today, what we are going to do is we are going to go over some motivation for why taking this course is important, and an overview of the various types of questions that the course will address, as well as the type of answers we'll try to provide. So by way of motivation, we can start with the problem. 865 million lived under $1 a day, or 99 cents to be precise. So you have to imagine living with $1 a day in Cleveland, maybe without having to worry about your housing or the education of your children. That's still very, very little money to make a living. So this is a problem that many people have been very concerned about, obviously. And a lot of the answers that you're going to find among the experts discourse in the world are very caricatural. On the one hand, you have the question of maybe aid can end poverty. So this would be the underlying thesis in, for example, the work of Jess Sachs at Columbia, which has the idea that if only the developed world would be willing to spend more money on the world's poor, all of their problems could be solved. On the other hand, you're going to have other people like Bill Easterly, also from New York, incidentally, or Dambisa Moyo, claiming, no, aid is not the solution. Instead, aid is the problem. It creates rents over which people are fighting. It prevents countries to achieve their own path to development. And if only we could stop giving aid, that would get us closer to a solution. So of course we are a little bit puzzled in between these two extremes. And the truth is, when you turn to the data, it's very difficult to answer the questions because look at Africa, for example. Africa received a lot of aid over the years. It's still very poor. However, how do we know what would Africa have done if it had not received the aid? Maybe it would have been even worse. Maybe it would have been better. We just don't know because we have only one Africa. So not only it's a question which is difficult to answer, but at some level it's not a very interesting question either. The reason is that, well, aid is such a small part of the amount of money that is being spent worldwide on the world's poor. Most of the money that is spent on the world's poor is being spent in the developing countries themselves, using the tax revenues of those countries. So the question of what aid can do is really not that interesting. The question that is important and interesting is the question of what kind of public policies or what kind of access to markets or what kind of individual or collective action can be taken in order to improve the lives of the poor. And that's what this course is really about, is going away from the slightly caricatural big debates that we have here in the US to center on the lives of the poor, from the poor's perspective, from a much more micro level, to try to understand how the poor really live, what their problems are, and how we can make a difference. Not only does this type of big questions and big answers cloud thinking, it also tends to hamper action. Because people get a little bit desperate when they see the magnitude of the problem, 750 million people living under $1 a day. They feel like maybe this is a problem I cannot solve, this is a problem I cannot address, so it's better not to think about it. And maybe it will go away. And in fact, there is plenty of evidence that when you try to confront individuals, us, with a big problem all taken at once, this really discourages them and prevents them to take action. So here is an experiment that scientists conducted at Wharton, a business school in Philadelphia. What they did is they went to students who were having a lunch in the cafeteria, and they presented them with one or two flyers. And they randomly selected who was getting each flyer. Some students got a flyer with a picture of a little girl, very much like this one, and were told, well, this is Rokia. She's 8-year-old living in Mali, and she needs your donation in order to be able to go to school and to afford the basic food and clothing for her. Other students got another flyer which says there are many millions of people living in terrible conditions in Zambia, unless you do something to help them, they are going they are at risk of dying from starvation. Then, in both cases, the flyer asked them to give some money to Save the Children, an organization that is known to deal with this kind of problem. And their question was, who was the better fundraiser? And here was the result. The result was that Rokia was by far the greatest fundraiser. So people, when they were faced with just one child, were willing to be generous and give a little bit of money. But when they were exposed to many million children, they felt, oh, I can't really address this problem. I'm not going to give money. So then the researchers were interested in a second question. Suppose that I made you aware that this is a bias that we all experience, and that you have a tendency to give to an identifiable victim as opposed to try to solve the general problem. So they went to two different groups of students and again gave them one of two randomly selected flyers. This was the same flyer that was just described with one difference. Before that it said, well, we have found in other research that people tend to be fooled by identifiable victims compared to more general discourse about the poor. They were interested if, because of that, to find out whether, if because of this warning, people would be more willing to give to the millions of people affected. So here are the results of this experiment. So the result was that the bias was in fact reduced. That is true. However, not in the direction we might have hoped. People didn't start giving to the starving millions. They just stopped giving to Rokia. So when you made them aware of the problem, it made them even less willing to give to a person. And the reason is that they got just very despondent, very pessimistic about their ability to do something. We think that this can be changed if we just slightly change the perspective. Not try to convince people to give money to one little girl, because of course one little girl is only a very small part of the solution, even if it's an important one. But to try thinking about the problems that both Rokia and the starving millions face, not as a whole, but one by one, as very specific issues that maybe each of them admit a particular problems. And if we take those problems seriously one by one, we might be able to solve them. So this is what we want to do in this course. And in order to whet your appetite, what I'm going to do in the rest of this lecture is to go over a few surprising things that along the way we've learned about the lives of the poor when we look at them in this very specific lens, issue by issue, problems by problems.